So, according to the internet, the definition of prestige TV is episodic television that shows meticulous craftsmanship, the attention to detail, and the ability to delve deep into complex narratives. On the other hand, I've also seen on the internet that some people think it's just a marketing phrase and refers primarily to just pay cable shows like shows on HBO and Showtime. Chris doesn't know what Prestige TV is because apparently he's never watched Prestige anything.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
I found a website called 34st.com. I think 34th Street is what it's supposed to be. And they had a definition of prestige television that said prestige television prestige television is characterized by exceptional screenwriting, production quality, and substantial investment of resources. Television and its influence is often defined in ages, and many people have defined the 2000s through the present as the golden age of television, surpassing the socially conscious sitcoms and stereotype-driven family shows of the 80s and 90s. So that was and that's kind of how I think of it when I threw the phrase prestige television at you and suggested maybe we would do an episode. That's what I was thinking, was basically just better TV than what you see generally on networks. And it usually ends up not being on the big three networks, although I think there are some exceptions. It's often on paid cable, but some of the other, the USA's and where was Breaking Bad on? AMC, those are not paid cable, but I think some of those shows, or they have some shows that should be considered prestige TV.
I'm looking forward to listening to you on this episode because I don't know a damn thing about prestige TV.
Yeah, it's really funny. I don't know exactly how many other definitions are out there, but in my mind, I think that 34th-street.com goes a long way towards explaining how I feel about what I call prestige TV. And I do think that generally speaking, those shows, the shows that I consider to be prestige TV, are dramas and hour-long dramas as a general rule, which I think is probably what kept you from watching many of them, because it sounds like you don't usually sit down for an hour at a time and watch a show, even now.
Nope.
Even now that you're fucking old and should just,
take a rest. Just shit on my ass. Sit on my ass.
Well, that also happens when you get old, I'm afraid.
Sit on my ass and watch TV.
Yeah, so I think prestige TV probably started in the 80s, particularly the late 80s, but it was really more of a 90s thing through the 2000s where, again, the cable networks, who I don't know if they had more money or were just more willing to gamble, but they put money into a bunch of shows that usually land on most people's best TV of all time list. So, and there were certain creators that seemed to crank out this stuff to show after show. So probably the first thing that anybody would think of if you said prestige TV would probably be The Sopranos, which I loved. And as I understand it, you've never seen.
Yep.
It's good. You should see it.
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty decent.
So David Chase created The Sopranos, and I think he directed a ton of episodes, and I think he wrote I think he was a showrunner in kind of the universal sense of the word. I think he had his hand in everything with that show, and it is unbelievable. I watched it when it was coming out on a weekly basis, which I'm going to say is probably mid-90s. I don't remember the exact dates, but not too many years ago, I rewatched it, and I would basically watch an episode per exercise session. At that point, I was riding my bike in the basement in the winters on a trainer downstairs, and I just decided, I'm going to watch it from first episode to last. And holy shit, it was still really, really good. And if anybody has not seen Sopranos, and I think it's probably you, Chris, and like one other dumbass, you got to watch it, man. It's really, really good. It's amazing to me that they were able to create this cinematic experience almost every episode. Not every episode was perfect, of course, and some maybe were just biding time or killing time, but man, almost every episode was top of the heap.
So I do see what you did there with that killing time, because I think there's a lot of death in The Sopranos.
Yes, lots of deaths, lots of
Nice.
surprise deaths. Yeah, I'm going to say that I did that on purpose, even though.
So I have a couple things to interject. Otherwise, I won't be speaking a lot in this episode. So David Chase did it, and I believe he was a writer for the Rockford Files back in the day.
Yeah, which I didn't know until trying to do some research for this thing.
So I was ahead of my time because I used to watch the Rockford Files with my parents.
Me too. I love that show.
I did too. It was a weekly thing that I would watch with my parents.
Yeah, and he, as I understand it, he wrote for them and ended up being a producer and maybe even executive producer. So he didn't create that show, but that was one, and that show lasted a long, long time. I don't think necessarily that Rockford Files would be considered prestige TV even back then. It was definitely popular, but again, trying to come up with some kind of workable definition of it. One of the things about that show was every episode was independent. They were all kind of bottle episodes, which meant that everything, there was a beginning, middle, and an end, and it was kind of like the mystery of the week kind of thing. And there were a lot of shows back then that did that, but very few of them, I think, had James Garner, for example. I think he was a big reason that show was so good. But I think they also just had better writing, because there were all kinds of shows that did what Rockford Files did. I just don't think they did it as well.
And that was what we would watch. Would be I don't know. I think they might have called it the mystery of the week because it was like Columbo,
Yeah,
Kojak. I forget. There was a female detective too. I forget.
There was something in White, McMillan and Wife. Was that it?
McMillan and Wife. That's what it was.
Yeah, that was all like late 70s, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those shows started out as weekly shows or had been weekly shows. And then by the time, right around when we were probably getting ready to go to college, you're right, there would be just a Friday night show and they would alternate between all of those. But I feel like Rockford Files was head and shoulders better than all those other detective.
So by that
shows.
definition, if Rockford Files is the best, it's the most prestigious. So I watch some prestige TV. Boom.
Perfect, exactly. What I find is, and one of the things about, for me, prestige TV is it does seem to be kind of an auteur situation. When you talk about auteur, the auteur theory in films where there's certain directors who create films that all have a certain style that they, that they're responsible for and they get famous for. I think, to me, that's what the concept of prestige TV is as well, because one of the guys that I love, who technically may not fall within the definition because most of his stuff, at least early on, was network TV, but Aaron Sorkin, who's also won an Oscar. I think he wrote and directed the Social Network and a bunch of other movies, plays. He's just a talented writer in general. But he created West Wing, or The West Wing, which we actually talked about briefly an episode ago. He also did a show called The Newsroom, which I actually haven't seen, and it's supposed to be fantastic. He did Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, which was a great post-West Wing show that I think only lasted 2 seasons. And a show called Sports Night, which is one of my favorites. And that one was actually a half hour. It was more of a comedy. But they all had, Aaron Sorkin has a very signature style, the walk and talk concept, where everybody they don't talk the way normal people talk. It's very rapid fire dialogue and everybody is witty as hell. And, you don't actually see that in a workplace or, at home. But it works in his shows. It just kind of, it's very funny, it's very smart, and you got to kind of sprint to keep up. But I think he was one of those auteurs that laid the groundwork for later shows like The Sopranos, like 6 Feet Under, which was a really, an HBO show that I think falls within that category. There was also a show created by David Milch called Deadwood, also an HBO show. Deadwood, again, way too short. I think it was only 2 or 3 seasons, and it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. And then they came back quite a few years later, and did a movie to try to tie everything up. But David Milch is another of those guys who I think he got his feet wet in network TV. He created Hill Street Blues, or I think he was a writer on Hill Street Blues, but he created NYPD Blue, which again is kind of episodic and very insular. There's always a crime and you solve the crime. But all of those shows would have these kind of overarching storylines. And I don't think NYPD Blue would necessarily be prestige TV, but I think he just created these really interesting shows with interesting characters, and he had a real knack for dialogue, and it really shows in Deadwood if you ever get a chance to see that.
I do want to take credit for Deadwood though, because I was asking you what prestige TV was, and I just throw in like Is Longmire, which is one of the few hour-long serious shows that I've watched, and it made you think of Deadwood. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I've heard Longmire is really good. That is a show I've not seen.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's some great acting, especially they did have some overarching stories, but I don't think it technically falls into what we're calling prestige TV, but I wouldn't know.
Not yet, but
Not yet.
after
By
we
the
have
end of this
conversation.
episode, I will refer people to you because you'll still know more.
The only other thing that I wanted to mention as kind of an introduction to the concept of prestige TV is, again, another auteur, in my opinion. There's a guy named David Simon, who I believe was formerly a journalist in Baltimore. And one of the first things he created for television was a miniseries called The Corner, which was set in Baltimore. And again, miniseries is a little different than series television, but definitely, kind of a prestigious thing. My feeling about those, the shows that I think about in that category are that they're more like literature. They're more like films. In other words, they're not episodic in the same way. They're obviously, you have to have all kinds of conflict and things go up and down and what have you. That's a lot easier to do in a shorter form, like a miniseries, which was what The Corner was. But The Corner was really good, and it led to him creating a different series that was ongoing. I think it lasted 6 seasons, maybe 7, called The Wire. And I imagine you've heard of The Wire only because, again, if you Google best TV ever, The Wire is always in the top 3, and there is a really good reason for that. Every season of that focused on a different part of Baltimore and really dug into the characters and the problems of that city, which, were really kind of revolved around poverty and race and, just like any big city, particularly on the East Coast. And it was really insightful, but the acting was amazing. I know that the first season was kind of a cops and robbers season, and the bad guy was a drug dealer in the neighborhood, and the good guys were detectives. But there was one whole season about the local paper, the Baltimore Sun, or whatever they called it in the show, and journalists. And then there was another one that was about the politics of the city. And by the time they got to their final season, everything kind of came full circle. And you would see characters from season 1 in the other seasons, but he just had this great, it felt very much like the Great American Novel, except, on a TV screen. He's just a really talented dude. And, again, I can't recommend enough seeing any of the shows that he did. And most of these guys, these directors, creators I'm talking about, also have done film, and in some cases have done theater as well. And they just love to write, obviously.
I haven't seen The Wire either.
How about The Corner?
No.
No? Okay. Another one he did that David Simon created, Treme.
I've heard of that, and that Subdued played a song. They played one of the main songs on that. Yeah.
It's a fantastic TV show for the soundtrack because it is set in New Orleans. And it's similar to The Wire in that the city is kind of a character as well, because Baltimore is certainly a character in The Wire. It is even more so in Treme. John Goodman is in that show, by the way, and again, just a fantastic cast. I think that was a little short-lived. I think I want to say it was only 3 seasons, but like you said, the Subdueds played. You got, I think Kermit Ruffins was a recurring character on the show, and he was in the show as a musician. I don't think he played himself, but I think he played a trumpet player. So the music was always great, and that one I think was very underrated as television in general. But it had, again, David Simon just has this ability to tell these big stories, these kind of large picture stories about areas while still focusing on really good characterization. So what I guess I'm saying is watch all those shows. I could probably do a whole nother episode just talking about some other shows that maybe fall on the edges, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But I do agree that since the 90s, television is so much better. Because, you know, I look at most of the sitcoms that have come out, and this isn't all of them, and of course I've even recommended some, I think, really good sitcoms, but network TV in particular just has some of the dumbest fucking shows I've ever seen. And they've remade shows like Magnum PI, and they've remade shows, and it just seems to me that you ought to be able to come up with some new stories and you know, create something instead of just using old intellectual property and kind of doing the same thing over again. And one place you can find it is, frankly, not on network TV, but on the HBOs and the Showtimes and even the you know, the FXs and AMC. You know, I haven't talked at all about Breaking Bad, but that's probably one of my top 2 or 3 shows ever. And it is phenomenal to watch. I know you haven't seen that, and we talked about it before. And that is an egregious error that you need to correct, because you will dig that show, man. It's really, really.
You're just giving me too much to watch here. I'm just going to shut down. I can't do it.
Yeah, there is a lot, because, you know, of course there was a sequel to I guess it's kind of a prequel and a sequel, but Bob Odenkirk, who played a secondary character in Breaking Bad, he was the lead character in Better Call Saul, which is about the attorney who plays a large role in Breaking Bad. But it follows him before the shit hits the fan in Breaking Bad, and then you know, there's also kind of closure afterwards as well. And you know, that's another guy. He's created some just amazing TV. Not Odenkirk, but the creator of Breaking Bad, whose name escapes me right now. And I do think I like just saying prestige TV because it makes me sound like I got more going for me than I do. So
you said we were going to do this episode for like, you gave me like a 1.5 year warning. And I was like, oh, that's just really good TV. I can handle this. And then when we started talking about what it means, it's like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to talk about.
Have you seen Who's the Boss?
Burn Notice. Is that prestige TV?
All right. First,
come on, Mr. Prestige. I'm asking you as Mr. Prestige TV.
Mr. PT. That's what they call
that's
him.
a good one. Yeah, I like that.
Or Mr. TP. What are my initials again? I love Burn Notice. I watched the pilot. I got sucked immediately into it. The lead character, that actor, was fantastic in the role. It's such a cool story about a guy who was like a cool James Bond secret agent, and then he got cut loose by his employer, which is kind of the CIA, except it appears that maybe even more mysterious and hidden than the CIA. I watched every episode of that show. I watched it religiously. That was back before, well, I certainly didn't have a DVR, so you had to be there on Tuesday night or whatever night it was. Love that show. Don't think it is prestige TV though. And the primary reason is what I already talked about, which is it is very episodic. It was definitely Mystery of the Week. It was completely set up that way. In fact, and I don't remember I think that was a USA show.
Yeah, for sure.
There were like 3 or 4, I think, good USA shows, but they all had the same format, which is the beginning of the show, they meet somebody who has a problem, and then they use their unique talents to solve that problem. Monk was a show like that. And I liked Monk, at least for the first couple of seasons. Burn Notice was absolutely like that. And there were these overarching stories, and there was a little bit of mythology that they would salt in through the season. And every once in a while, there was a show that appeared to be bigger picture. But so many of those episodes were, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's how we solve the problem, and then there's a little joke at the end. And it's only because of that I don't think it's technically prestige TV, at least in my mind. But I watch a whole lot of TV that isn't, prestige TV, and that was one of them. I think that's a great show.
So that does sound like a little familiar to me, like with the joke at the end and solving of the problem. So that's like one of my blogs without the solving of a problem.
Yeah. Although I consider your blogs to be prestige blogs.
I don't even know what to say to that because that's so far off.
By the way, great blog. We're recording ahead of time now, so I have no idea when it's coming out or whether it already came out. I think it did already come out.
Came out this morning, dude.
Oh, okay. So they will have read it by now.
Yeah, and I'll be referencing an episode that will not have been able to listen to because it won't be out for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I like being ahead of the game, but it's definitely confusing the hell out of me. Anyway, it is a great blog. It came out on August 8th, 2024. Read Chris's blog. It is a kind of self-analysis about his tendencies when it comes to listening to music, and it's really good.
Yeah, and I will apologize because there are no F bombs in there. No fuck
Fuck
bombs.
bomb. They used to call me fuck bomb in high school. Well, let's move on to a segment. You think? Should we do that?
Move along. Move along.
Move along. Nothing to see here. Do we
All
have any questions from listeners this week?
I'm sure our listeners are questioning this whole podcast, but there is there is a specific question from Jonathan in Ding Dong, Texas. What's the worst TV series you watched religiously?
So, like the opposite of prestige TV.
Exactly. I'll start because I really don't have a lot to talk about with prestige TV, so I can go with anti-prestige TV. So I had to think about this one for a while, but I think the worst show I ever watched, and I loved it, was Charles in Charge with Scott Baio and Nicole Eggert. And I can just pretty much stop on Nicole Eggert, which was the reason I watched it. Because
yeah, I get you.
back in the day, she was, I don't know what other show she came from, but she was maybe nothing. But I actually did start watching it because of Scott Baio, because I watched Happy Days all the time. I think it was on when I get home from school. I'm pretty sure it was in syndication by the time I was watching it, and it was religiously watched in our household. So I loved all the characters, and then Scott Baio showed up as Chachi, and then a close competitor for worst show ever was Joni Loves Chachi.
Yes,
which is famously referenced in Dodgeball. But I didn't really watch that. That seemed beneath me, but Charles in Charge is right at my level. So, and I couldn't tell you a damn thing about the show. He was
in charge. I'll tell you that.
In charge. He was a babysitter of a household of kids, or a nanny, I guess, whatever you want to call him, a nan. Since he was a
manny, right?
A manny. There you go. It had some funny moments, and I didn't dislike Scott Baio at the time, but he got more and more unlikable for a variety of reasons later. So I'm pretty sure it was pretty lousy TV even at the time when I was watching it. So that would be my answer.
I have two comments to that.
Yes.
One is that show is horrible. The other is Nicole Eggert. I was like, I know she was in something else. And I thought it was before Charles in Charge, but after Charles in Charge, she was in Baywatch.
Oh, that's right.
Which by acclaim, probably one of the worst shows ever on TV.
I never watched Baywatch though, so
I didn't either.
I couldn't claim it, but yeah.
But I mean, the commercials were great, right? I mean, and the opening of that show was pretty goddamn good. I would watch the first 5 minutes just to watch the opening. The other thing isn't Charles in Charge just Who's the Boss?
Yeah, pretty much, but with Scott Baio instead of Tony Danza.
Just a different Italian dude, younger Italian guy. Yeah.
And they both had who ended up being a fairly famous, what do we call them now? Attractive woman. So,
like an it girl.
It maybe? Girl. There you go.
By the way, looking at IMDb, Nicole Eggert, 7 episodes in Who's the Boss.
Huh. She must have stolen the idea. She ran over to Scott Baio. It's like, let's do a show like this one.
Nobody knows about this. Let's try this. Yeah, because she was that was like in 1985, and then Charles in Charge was started in 87, and she did 104 episodes of Charles in Charge.
Yep. She did a bunch. None of
them. So next up on our Nicole Eggert podcast.
Let's reach out to Nicole Eggert. I don't think she's doing anything. I bet she'd come on our podcast.
I say we do that. Definite video podcast. So in response to Jonathan's question, I would have to say that the worst show that I watched on a regular basis was called, I think the official title was Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it is a TV show set in the MCU, or it was. And that's what's really weird about it. One of the reasons it was kind of awful is it started out set completely in the MCU. I think it came out, I know it started in 2013. I don't remember what movies had already come out in the Marvel Universe at that point, but a bunch of them had. And I think the first Avengers had occurred because and I can't keep it all very straight, but the main character in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was Clark Gregg, or that's the actor's name, but he played Agent Coulson, who was he was in all those early superhero movies in the MCU, including the first Avengers, and I think he died in that Avengers movie. And Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came after that, and he was basically resurrected. And that was one of the big mysteries that it took years and a couple seasons anyway to kind of reveal exactly what happened to him. But I'm a kind of a superhero head. We talked about it before. I was a comic book guy, and I love the Marvel movies. And I was like, well, I'm going to watch this. And I watched the first couple episodes. I thought, well, this isn't really very good at all. But I couldn't stop watching it because it seemed to be connected to the movies. And I felt like, well, I need to watch this because they may do something in the movies, or the movies may get referenced. And in the first season or so, that's what they did. And then at some stage, while it was still going, because it was on for 7 years, they completely said, yeah, we're not part of the MCU anymore. And they just went off on their own. And it just kind of got worse and worse. And I kept watching it. And I cannot explain for the life of me. I got to the end, like the finale, and I thought, well, that's 7 years I can't get back. 1 hour at a time. So that's my answer to the question is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I do not recommend watching that. I feel like I had a good reason for starting. I have no reason for sticking around for like the last 6.5 years of that.
All right. Since we're the only ones that ever look at our website, let's do a quick poll. Who won that question? I say I did. You can vote either way. We can have a tie.
I think I won.
Okay.
Because I watched for 7 years and you could have only watched for 6, because I think that show was only on for 6 years. So I think I was the dumber guy.
That's true.
I win.
I was able to watch Nicole Eggert for those 6 years.
Yeah, see, and there's that. Although, actually, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Ming-Na Wen, do you know who she is?
I think I do, yes.
Beautiful woman, and was in almost every episode. Chloe Bennett she was kind of the main character, at least at the start of it. Very pretty girl. So I guess that's not why I watched it, though. I wish I could say that.
That's 2 pretty women to 1 pretty woman. I think I win.
Yeah. You were dumber. No,
what?
I don't know.
I was watching Scott Baio. Come on.
All right, you win. You
All
win.
right.
You got it. No problem.
Next segment.
Next segment is what?
Recommendation, dudes.
All right, let's recommend something from then that makes us talk about Prestige TV in one way or the other.
Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to continue with my theme of not being able to recommend anything Prestige related because I haven't seen any Prestige TV. So I looked at I wrote three things down, and I think you would argue that none of them qualify as Prestige. The closest I came was a show that I did love. I watched the entirety of the series, and then it recently restarted as a slightly different series, but that was Leverage with Timothy Hutton. And I thought it might be able to qualify because Timothy Hutton was a fairly famous actor before he went to that, but I think he was a little bit on the downside of his career when he hit that show. So I don't know, but he was fantastic in the show. It's about 5 con men that get together, con people that get together and help people who've been conned, and they flip the game on whoever did it, and they always come out the winner. And by that very quick summary, you can tell that it was very episodic.
Yep.
They'd have a problem, they'd deal with it, they'd go. So, and also it was 2008, so it started, so it doesn't technically fall into her then. So I'm going to go back to what I was going to do in the beginning, which was something that I'm sure no one has heard of, which was a small little TV series called ER.
Yeah, what does that stand for something?
You may have heard of at least one of the actors who was on it at one point. It was George, what's his last name again? Clooney, George Clooney. So that's where I'm going with this. This is like the ultimate anti-prestige TV series because a lot of people were on it before they were famous, and then they became famous, like George Clooney. It helped jumpstart his career. And I found a list of 10 people that were on ER before they were famous. Just name a couple of them. Chris Pine, of all people.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Nick Offerman.
I did not know that either. He's from this area, by the way.
Nice. Eva Mendes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna end with everyone's favorite, Zac Efron. So
No shit.
yes, shit, indeed. So ER was exceedingly episodic. It was exciting though. I watched it a lot. I think everyone in America watched it. So when I recommend it, none of you will be surprised. Those three of you listening to our show.
Neither of you will be surprised.
There was a list that came out in 2021 for recommendations for people to watch prestige TV during the pandemic. I went through like, it must have been 120 show names. I hadn't seen any of them. It's like I was living in a different country when all this stuff was going on or something.
That is funny that you hadn't seen any of those shows. That's pretty crazy.
So like The Wire, like everyone has seen The Wire, like everyone references it. I know, I get it. And Breaking Bad. There's memes, there's everything else about Breaking Bad. And I love the main actor. I mean, he's one of my favorites, and I've never watched it. Don't ask me why, I haven't. So this is a Tom episode. Keep going.
Have you ever seen Battlestar Galactica? The reboot of Battlestar Galactica, which was like in the early 2000s, I think.
No, you talked about it previously, and it's on my list. It's right at the top of what I need to watch next.
Yeah, I know, because truthfully, I would call that prestige TV.
Yep.
It is not episodic. It is definitely a long narrative that goes through multiple seasons with amazing characters, great actors, Edward James Olmos and other really, really good actors. But that's one that I would call also prestige TV. I think what it comes down to is if I liked it, I think it's prestigious.
That sounds good.
Although to respond to your ER selection, I watched that religiously as well. My wife and I watched that from after we moved up this way after I graduated law school. We never missed an episode of that show. But I do think that is your classic procedural, very similar to what we talked about with Burn Notice. It did have more overarching stories, but everything was very melodramatic. I don't consider ER to be, and I'm not sure this is the right word to use, but as literary as the other shows that I've discussed, the Wire or Breaking Bad. It is kind of the emergency of the week type of situation, and of course that's been American TV from the beginning. There were police shows and doctor shows. That's what everything was, and what you wanted to do was have at least a couple storylines that started and finished in the same episode, because that's the way people wanted to watch TV then. And I think the thing that changed as HBO and Showtime and some of the other networks branched out was they realized they could keep viewers by keeping the story going along too. And ER, I can't criticize it. I watched it just as much as anybody else in the country did, but I would say I don't necessarily think that it's that anybody would put it in that category. However, we need a ranking. We need you to tell me how many egg burritos with sour cream ER should get.
Well, for everything you and I talked about it, how we watched it religiously and everything else, it's probably a 5 out of 5. The fact that it doesn't fit the theme, really, take a star away. The fact that
I'm always interested in how you calculate this.
The fact that I knew that it didn't fit the theme is take another star away. So for this episode, I'm only willing to give it 3 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream, and I'll eat the other two. I'll eat the other two.
Okay, fair enough. So my recommendation for then is a show that was not as popular as ER, but I think was pretty much on about the same time, or at least started at the same time. ER ran forever. But there was a TV show on network called Homicide: Life on the Streets. And it, I think, just barely qualifies as prestige TV because it was fairly episodic. But I think it was one of the precursors. It was one of those shows that kept the character stories going on over multiple episode arcs. And it certainly led to creation of shows that I don't think are prestige at all, which is those, the Chicago Fires and the what's the CSI, what's the beginning of it? My wife watches it constantly.
Oh,
Not CSI, but CSI is one of them.
Law and Order.
Right, all of the Law and Order shows. Homicide preceded those. I think it had more quality. I think it had better acting. I think it was more interesting over the length of the show as a narrative, as opposed to, again, definitely Mystery of the Week when it comes to, those shows, those what they call procedurals. So it's right on that border, but it is also really good. And the characters that are in Homicide, or I should say the characters, the actors in Homicide: Life on the Streets were so good that that show does bear rewatching, and I would recommend that you see it. I really like that show and really liked it more. I actually ended up buying the DVD box set at some point down the line because I would only see it sporadically. And when I watched it through episode by episode, kind of binged it, I realized just how good it was. And for that reason, I will give it 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream.
What about Mindhunter? Did you ever see that one?
I've never seen it. I've heard it's good.
Does that qualify as prestige? I watched the first season.
Well, if you watched it, then yes. Because I haven't watched it, I have no idea.
All right, we'll go back there later. All right.
It sounds procedural to me.
Trying really hard to get.
By the way, Leverage, I've never seen that show either, and I've heard it's excellent. Like it is on my list.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Then I sort of put it out of my head until you talked about how like people with their different unique talents solve the problem of the episode. And that's what that one is. There's 5 characters and they all have like one guy's a strong guy, the other guy's really good with numbers and all this other stuff. So really good stuff.
They're like the X-Men.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from.
It came from you, dude.
Right out of my fucking noggin. All right, I've been trying to put this off, but it is time for post factum.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Yeah, so I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off of this one. In our last episode, we had a long conversation about one of my favorite songs of all time, which is called Dig Down by Bobby Bare Jr. Chris kind of piped in and said, hey, one of the best things about that is this musical reference that goes on and that he plays throughout the song. And it was from a Rolling Stones song. And I was like, fucking dummy. That wasn't Rolling Stones. That was Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. No, it wasn't. It was Rolling Stones. He definitely references Sympathy for the Devil, and it's awesome. And instead of you having to tell 10,000 people that you were wrong, now I have to tell 10,000 people I was wrong, because I think I always say it was Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side.
Oh, I thought you meant for the episode, because I was going to say you're getting off a lot easier. You're only telling 3 people that you're wrong.
That's true. Yeah, but what if they tell 3 people? It could go on, man.
That's true.
So that is the biggest, most egregious mistake I've made. And that was what, I wrote down on the outline. I did, however, realize just as we were speaking that we both failed to rate our recommendations from last episode.
Oh, yeah, we did, because we changed things up.
And we did.
It took me 3 seasons to get used to it. So
yeah.
So now I got to get used to it again.
I know. I was very confused. But so just to go back real quick, and maybe you can do the same thing. Last episode, I recommended Black Velvet, the song by Alana Miles from 1989. Said how much I like that song, how kind of sexy it is, and sultry her voice was. And I think that's a 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream.
I chose Contrails by Richmond Fontaine, and if I could give it 6 out of 5 stars, I would, because 1, it's 5 out of 5 egg burritos. Sorry, not stars. Tom gets the stars. It's 5 out of 5 egg burritos for the quality of the song, the meaning to me. I consider it to be a bonus egg burrito because Tom doesn't like Richmond Fontaine. So,
so I'm going to say
5 out of 5.
5+ out of 5. And I think that's all we had for post facto. It's all I have for post facto. You clearly didn't make any mistakes again this time.
In fairness, I know you feel really bad and you hate when I'm right and you're wrong.
No.
But when we were arguing it, I did say it was from a different Rolling Stone song. So I will knock off a half a letter grade for not completely nailing it and rubbing it in your face. Because I think I said it was like Can't Get No Satisfaction or something. I was looking at a
Yeah,
list of Rolling
you
Stones
did,
songs.
you did seem willing to concede, but you shouldn't have been because I was just fucking wrong. That's what it was.
I'm just a nice guy, man.
You are? I try to tell people that they don't believe me.
You're funny. I am nice. And you know
You
what?
are nice.
You were fucking wrong, idiot.
See, you're a good man. All right. Do you want to go on to our playlist picks?
No, because I want to do our staff picks, dude.
Random, just around the corner from you.
So you're correct. It is time for staff picks. I'll go first. My recommendation for some recent pop culture that I thought was really worth taking in is a movie on Netflix called Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. So technically, I think it's Beverly Hills Cop 4. It's at least 3. No, I think it's actually the 4th one because I think there was a Beverly Hills Cop 3, which I don't think was very good. The first Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy was one of my favorite movies of that time, of the 80s. It was so funny. He was so funny. He had taken the world by storm at that point. And it was just the perfect character for him. I don't know that they wrote a single line of dialogue. I think he just improvised everything, and he was outstanding. Beverly Hills Cop 2 was, I thought, not equally as good, but very good. And then, like I said, I think I saw 3, and I don't think it was worth a damn. But I was hesitant to watch this new sequel, and we had a Saturday night. I turned on Netflix. I thought, what the hell? It's a short movie. It's less than 2 hours. I might as well watch it. And you know what? Pretty damn good. And he was awesome. It's an older Eddie and it's an older Axel, but he's still a wisecracker and he's still a guy, still a cop, although his buddies are all getting ready to retire. He's got some family strife, and when he goes back out to Los Angeles and California, he part of the story is about hooking up with his daughter, seeing his daughter after years of being estranged. This story itself is just okay, and the other acting is just okay, but he is so good, just like the other movie. He's just so damn good and so funny and quick-witted that I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was a great movie, and it exceeded my expectations. So my staff pick is Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, currently showing on Netflix.
Very nice. So you're saying that he improvised the line, "I'm not going to fall for the old banana in the tailpipe."
I'm just saying he was really good. I don't know. Maybe they wrote that. It seems like it is solid script writing. I will say that.
I have said that line probably 40 times in my life, which is funny because I can't think of 40 different situations where that'd be an appropriate thing to say. All right, so I am returning to form with my staff pick. So now people that come into our record store will start to trust me again, because I think 4 of the last 5 or 3 of the last 4, I had chosen female singers, which is perfectly fine. But as Tom knows, and I've said many times, it's not my forte. I like listening to female singers. It's just not something I gravitate toward often. And this week I am making another music recommendation for my staff pick. It's an album from a band called the Red Clay Strays, and it's Made by These Moments. And I will say this, I am not a fan of the whole red clay movement or whatever. I find a lot of that overdone. A lot of stuff's very derivative from others who've led that movement. But even though it says Red Clay Strays, there's certainly some aspects of that. But what I think differentiates this band, they're from Alabama, just so folks know. What differentiates them is the lead singer. He is got a very unique voice that does not sound straight country. In fact, I read a review where they said, and his name is Brandon Coleman, it said he can sound like 3 different singers from 3 different genres steeped in 3 separate eras, all in the same phrase, shape shifting so that every single note conveys the maximal amount of emotion. I thought all the songs on the album were solid. I'm not 100% sure which would be a standout. I've only listened through once, but I was really moved and intrigued by his voice. And if they stay together and he stays the forefront of that band, I think they're going to make some noise. So Red Clay Strays, their latest album, which just came out, again, is entitled Made by These Moments. I would encourage you to check that one out.
Yeah, that, you know what? I almost recommended that one. It was on my short list. I only heard of that band a few months back. A friend of mine, well, a coworker of my wife's mentioned it to me. He said, "Hey, you listen to a lot of different music, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You should listen to Red Clay Strays." So as I always do in that situation, I immediately, put it on my phone and downloaded it for later. And then it was like another week or so before I listened. Really like that band. I agree with that review. I agree with what you said. I've only listened to it through once, but I think it's really good.
Yeah.
However, I have a question, which is I don't know what the red clay movement is.
Red Dirt. So it's the Red Dirt movement. And I found an article about it. For example, Cross Canadian Ragweed is considered Red Dirt. So it's all these bands from a certain part of Texas, and they usually merge different influences, but I just found that they become very tired.
There's like who are the seminal red dirt artists? And Jimmy LaFave. There's one, Jimmy LaFave. I've heard of him, don't really like him. Steve Ripley, Bob Childers, Red Dirt Rangers, have heard of them.
Yeah.
Oh, Mike McClure. I like Mike McClure. I didn't know he was Red Dirt. All right. So number 10 on this list. How this guy's number 10 on any list, I don't understand. But Robert Earl Keen.
That's who I was thinking of.
Oh, that's the guy. Yeah, you're right. He wrote that song. That's absolutely right. And then Pat Green, who I don't like at all.
Yeah, I don't like Pat Green. So
Reckless Kelly.
Used to like him, don't like him anymore.
Corey Morrow. I like Corey Morrow.
Yeah.
I think I kind of like the red.
And I think like any other genre, there's a couple core figures who are good, and then everyone else copies and they suck.
Yeah, because here's another one how he could be 15, I don't know. Chris Knight is on that list.
Oh, Chris Knight's on that list?
I fucking love Chris Knight. He's fantastic.
I love Chris Knight. I agree.
Now we should talk about picks for our playlist, our season 4 playlist.
Let's do it.
All right.
Why don't you go first? Because you've been, you know what? Let's not have you go first. How about I go first?
All right. Why don't you go first?
So when Tom and I were talking yesterday in preparation for this, I was throwing up is this one? Is The Simpsons prestige TV show? Is there? So finally I was like, how about Yellowstone? It's got Kevin Costner. And while I never really watched it, it was on in my house a lot and I walked past it. And one time I was walking past and I was like, hey, that's Shane Smith and the Saints, which is a band that I do know and like. And they have a new album, which is not, otherwise I would have picked it for staff picks. But they have a new album out called Norther. And one of my favorite songs on that one is a slower one. They're usually a little bit more upbeat. Hell, they might be Red Dirt artists. I don't know, but
that's funny.
They have a song called "All the Way," which is a slow ballad, and it's talking about a couple staying together. One of the lines I'm just going to paraphrase instead of quoting, which Tom will be shocked by, but it's talking about seeing the gray hairs and the wrinkles grow, and that he would be with her all the way. So very sappy love song. But what I like about it is, again, it's a little different for them. You can hear the chair, I assume it's a chair, squeaking as he's singing. I really like those raw, just very natural recordings. And his voice has a lot of depth that I don't think I was thinking about. There's parts of it that sound a little like Johnny Cash, especially later Johnny Cash, like when he was singing.
Come on, man. We know this. This is ridiculous. Hurt. There it is. Fucking great song. God,
it's a fantastic song. And when you listen to the beginning of this Shane Smith song, you can hear a little bit of that version of Johnny Cash's voice, I think. And it's not a copy because he has definitely his own sound. But so that's my choice, All the Way by Shane Smith and the Saints. The reason I've chosen it for this playlist is it was that band grew in prestige by playing on Yellowstone on one of the episodes, and they talked about it in a nice article about how much it gave them a bump, which is cool because I don't necessarily like the show, but I do like the band. So,
by the way, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails has basically come out and said, "Yeah, Hurt. That's Johnny Cash's song now, not my song at all." Like he's like, it's not a cover. That's the version. When I play it, it's a cover. That's amazing. That's really something.
That's cool.
My playlist pick for third song in season 4, episode 3, is the soundtrack to the TV show, was from the soundtrack to the TV show Justified, which came out in 2010. I can't believe it's that long since that show was on the air, at least the first season. It's a song called Long Hard Times to Come. It's actually the theme song. So you only get a little clip of it at the beginning of each episode of Justified, which is a great show, by the way. The band is called Gangsta Grass, and it is exactly what it sounds like, which is it is a mashup of bluegrass and hip hop. And it is, I just think it's a really catchy song. I always like the beginning of the show because of that, because it just has this twangy kind of unusual, unique sound. And then the lyrics, the singing over it is, sounds like a guy who sings hip hop, who sings rap. It's when you listen to the whole song, equally good. It's really just kind of a cool, catchy song. I think it'll be a good song to put on the playlist. So my pick is Long Hard Times to Come by Gangsta Grass from 2010, the Justified soundtrack. You will be able to find both of our picks on third song in season 4. And you'll be able to find them on Spotify, on Amazon Music, YouTube Music, and Apple Music. And take a listen and tell us what you think.
And you'd be able to access all those playlists directly from our website, thirdsonginpodcast.com. We have links to listen to the podcast directly. We have all of our recommendations, updating it for season 4 as I speak. We also have a direct link to the blog, and we put one out each week. I just published one, but by the time you hear this, it'll probably be Tom's, because we're way ahead. You can also communicate with us on the website. There's a way to say contact us. It'll go directly to our email. Tom, what's our email address?
Our email address is thirdsongin@gmail.com. Please send us your comments, your questions, your recommendations, your opinion about our episodes or our own recommendations. We also have a Facebook page. You can read it. It's called Third Song In on Facebook. You can communicate with us through that as well. And we would welcome the feedback.
We especially welcome your own picks. What are your favorite Prestige shows? And any worthy comments, we'll add them directly to the website so you can see your name in shining lights, because our website is a shining lights kind of place. You've been listening to Third Song In with Tom Polachek and Chris Derrickson. Thanks for listening. All right, get focused.
All right. Sorry, dude. Sorry. I'm wait. Okay. No, not yet. Okay. I'm going to do a cold open. Okay.
Hold on.
Shit. Now I lost my phone.
Okay, hold on. Wait. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Wait. Wait. Zip.
So the definition.
Although I did, sorry.
You motherfucker.